Welcome to Reimagining the Internet from the Initiative for Digital Public Infrastructure at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. We're talking to researchers, techies, activists, academics, and journalists about what's wrong with the Internet and how to fix it. I'm your host, Ethan Zuckerman. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Reimagining the Internet. I am Ethan Zuckerman, your host. I am thrilled to be here today with my friend Bruno Patino. Bruno is the president of Arte TV. It's a French-German TV channel. He is a longtime and celebrated French journalist. He is the former dean of the School of Journalism at Sciences Po. And he is the author of several works, but most recently, a pair of books, which we might translate the titles as The Civilization of the Goldfish and Tempest in a Goldfish Bowl, The Revenge of the Civilization of the Goldfish. Bruno, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Ethan. It's wonderful to be here.
So, Bruno, talk to me about the consequences of the attention economy as you start outlining them in the book that you wrote in 2019, The Society or the Civilization of the Goldfish.
Well, in fact, you know, I've been working in digital journalism for almost 25 years now, and so for a long time I am still thrilled, absolutely thrilled of what digital brought to our profession, to our societies, and our countries. And I worked developing Le Monde.fr and other websites in France. So I was really at a moment and still strongly convinced that digital was not only transforming our profession as journalists, not only transforming the information, but also transforming societies and maybe even our civilization. And at a time, when you're very focused on your job, you know you're competing for audiences, for attention. You try to on an everyday basis to compete for having the highest number of clicks possible in order to promote your information. And little by little, you realize that at a moment something changed, not only in your profession but also in the way of us having and handling our tools and our digital tools. So the small book, the first book, The Civilization of the Goldfish, came from the simple realization that two things had happened. First, some of us, and I'm one of them, were kind of hooked on their smartphones. And the second realization that this global attention economy was polarizing our public space. But in fact, at the beginning, it was a very practical book that tried to answer the simple question: what happened? What did happen to our expectations, to our professions, to what we want to see? So in fact, the simple way to put it was that the attention economy, in a way, centralized the system, privatized him, and the duality between the business model and the technology, that is a business model linked to a technology, in fact, started this competition for attention that really is having a lot of consequences. So, individual consequences, my attention span is really an objective for a lot of companies, and collective also consequences. That is polarization.
And the goldfish, of course, is the reference to...
Yeah, it's an image. The goldfish is an image. I mean, it started with a YouTube, in fact, a YouTube seminar organized in Madrid. And I'm trying to to tell that story. Of course, it's a metaphor, but it was a real good example because on a YouTube seminar, we had this Google very smart engineer showing us the goldfish image and say, the attention span of a goldfish is 8 seconds. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's true or not, but the guy said that, and he said, well, we try to figure out the attention span of the millennials, and the attention span of the millennials is 9 seconds. and he was laughing at that. He said, do you realize how difficult for us it is now to capture the attention span of the millennials? This is a challenge. And you know what? We are meeting. We try to meet with this challenge.
We have figured out how to program for the goldfish, which is the millennial.
Exactly, and so you had really two audiences in that room. The very optimistic audiences say, well, yes, we have tools that allow us to hook or to hook the attention for people that are very difficult, whose attention is very difficult to capture because every 9 seconds they think to something else. And you had people like me said, wow, what did happen? Right. In order for us to try to figure out how to build instruments in order to capture the attention span of people every 8 or 9 seconds. And this is the start of the book. That is a challenge for tech companies, but something has happened, and let's try to figure out what.
Something you said a moment before, I think really gets into the argument in the new book, which in many cases is about the power of the platforms. And it's this question of centralization. You and I have both been involved with the technology space for more than 25 years. There's this tremendous surprise, I think, at the power of the centralized platform. The early promise of the internet was a diversity of voices. There would be many, many people speaking on many, many platforms. Yet, in some ways, the world seems more centralized than it was in the era of just 2 or 3 broadcast networks and a small number of newspapers. What happened from your perspective, and maybe from a French perspective, around that centralization? Why did we fall so short of those ideals?
I think none of us, from what I know, I didn't understand the power of scalability when users' data is concerned. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that at the very beginning of the internet that both of us experimented, we saw this complete power of decentralization, let's say, of the voices, like you say, the offer, the capability of everybody putting available whatever content you want, and the ability of the tool of really having this share economy. We didn't really figure out what would come with users' data. Yeah. And when you have the ability and the economic model allow the platforms to have the ability to accumulate users' data and really, at the end of the day, there is a very strong scalability there. And the scalability really, it's like at the beginning of the industrial civilization, when you have the accumulation of capital, that really brought up a very strong centralization of the industrial economy. And at the end of the day, the states, the powers had to intervene in a way in order to try to decentralize this accumulation of capital. I'm not a very strong fan of comparisons as far as history is concerned, but in a way we could make this kind of comparison and say we have experience from, let's say, 2005 till now, the power of accumulation of users' data. And the problem is when you accumulate users' data, it's not only a quantity of users' data you accumulate, you change the quality of the data because you are able to to drive some intelligence from this data. And the scalability of accumulation of data, this is what happened, in fact, of users' data. And this, at the end of the day, really allows you to manage the interface in a way that provokes oligopolistic power.
It's almost a Thomas Piketty argument, right? That you sort of start with this accumulation of capital in data, and at a certain point it gives you an advantage, and you are then that much further ahead of everyone else. There is the possibility in capitalist systems that the government can step in and redistribute. I'm not sure redistribution of data is something that anyone sort of wants in this case. What are your thoughts on sort of how we decenter the power of platforms? You have some very practical thoughts for how individuals detoxify, disconnect, all of these things. Talk to us about some of the systemic change that could happen in this space.
Well, in fact, if you realize that as far as systemic change is concerned, let's say we have three paths, different paths. One would say that let's try what I said is in French is corriger la machine, and that is let's try to fix the machine from the inside, let's say. Either because the users drive you to do so, or because the state drives you to do so. Or the second path would be to regulate the machines or the platforms, and the third path would be to build the alternatives. Whatever the path is concerned, the strong question is what is really, let's say, the legal status of the data you accumulate. If you are always able to privatize this data and makes it non-interoperable with other platforms, then you don't solve the problems. Because the problem is when you accumulate a lot of data, once again, this is changing the nature of the data, because I'm pretty sure that the data you accumulate at the moment allows you to build intelligence from this data you accumulate. So at the moment, we will have to think about the legal status of the data you accumulate. I absolutely agree with you. There is no redistribution possible. But in a way, we are here and people are listening my French accent. So in France, we used to make a difference between let's say a public good and a private good. In the US, you have also the common good that is coming. So we have three kind of legal status of what data could be considered, how data could be considered public good, common good, or private good. At a moment or another, we will have to try to have this kind of discussion. Once again, I'm not a big fan of people saying, the user should be the owner of its data. Okay, can fix something for, let's say, for privacy reasons or whatever, but it doesn't fix the problem of centralization of the internet. Not at all. The problem is when you accumulate this kind of data, can other company use it or not? Can association use it or not? This is the main question, it seems to me.
So that takes us to, I think, an interesting question about paradigms that are at work in different countries. In the US right now, the obsession is with everything becoming property. So it's your data. You should be able to sell it on the market for as much as possible. I'm sure at some point we'll conclude that not only can you sell your data, you can also sell your kidneys. It does seem like the logical direction to go. I'm just back from the UK. I heard a lot of enthusiasm there for private data stores. And so the idea there is you control your data. There's no money associated with it, but it is yours. It's sovereign. You seem to be suggesting that there's something more complex than this, which is that once you've accumulated the data, once you've sort of put it together, it's sort of an entirely different good. Is that sort of a European alternative to this sort of the marketized versus the private, something that's more of a collective good with data?
Well, first, I'm speaking here in France. So in France, we are absolutely obsessed with the state.
Yeah.
And if you look in a very, let's say, in a nutshell of our history, you have, in fact, two ways to consider the state here. One which would say more center and right-wing oriented, that is, the state has a force to regulate the market because we don't believe in the power of the free power of the market. Or on the other way, the state has been an actor in this market, a public actor that is really having a kind of role and which can re-equilibrate the market because he enters the market as the state. So as far as digital economy is concerned, we have those two the two models here in France today. So the ones that are obsessed with regulation, the state has either the state or the European Commission as a regulator of the market, and in this kind of things, the state that will try to figure out how the market of the data is re-equilibrated between users and platforms. Okay, and in fact that drives us to your UK example. Let's say, how could the state organize the free market of the individual data between the user, who is a very small part, and the platform, who has billions of users and for which a user doesn't count. And so we have seen this policy developed by the European Commission, by some French political forces here, and say, okay, let's try to figure out how we re-equilibrate the relationship between the user and the platform as far as the individual data is concerned. But the problem when you do that is you don't focus and you don't address the problem of platforms having billions and billions of users of users' data, and others, new actors emerging or coming, having non-user data. I think it maybe it re-equilibrates the relationship between the user and the platform, and for me it's most privacy issues than really market issues, because the value of your individual data is very small, but it doesn't address at all the problem between the inequality and maybe the market barrier entry that you can build when you have billions of users' data accumulated. For the moment, here in this country, almost nobody addresses this problem. We are so focused on the relationship between the users and the platforms that we don't focus on the inequality between digital actors as far as users' data are concerned.
You just offered a very thoughtful political distinction between a sort of European right point of view and a European left point of view. In a European right point of view, the state is important as a regulatory agent in the market. On a European left point of view, the state is important as an actor in the market.
Exactly.
You are the president of an ambitious television partnership between France and Germany that ends up creating extremely high-quality content. We've seen a great deal of European public media creating top-quality news, top-quality content. What we have not seen is the European state effectively building digital services. We could go back to Minitel and talk about the ways in which Informatique Français has been very successful in the past, but in the contemporary internet era, we haven't seen much state involvement in the internet market economy per se? Could that change?
This is a very interesting question, and let me give you maybe two answers to that. First, if we go back to the Minitel, the interesting thing with the Minitel in France, it was not developed at all by media companies, but by La Poste.
Yeah.
That is the mail company. So it was always seen as a technical stuff, a technical way to distribute things.
But not as a media company.
Not as a media company. And this is the main problem, as far as I'm concerned, because when we're talking about public media companies in Europe and in France, it's been very easy for us to develop content and to show that we could promote content that were not financed by the market. Mm-hmm. You know, say if Arte or other public service broadcasters or media in Europe doesn't produce or finance this kind of programs, they won't be financed.
Sure.
You won't see them. I mean, it's so it's been quite easy to convince people that we were useful in a way, because otherwise this kind of content, you don't see them. It escapes the market. And one of the biggest questions for the moment is about information. Can you have general information financed by the market when you're in Europe and you don't rely on a market of 3,000 people that are speaking English but that speak French or Danish or Swedish or German or whatever? But when we're talking about, let's say, the transformation or the digital media, let me answer you very frankly here and kind of sadly. What I'm perceiving when I talk to the state is that, okay, go into the digital field. It's fine, but don't mess with users' data. Yeah. There is a kind of conviction in our states, and we have to change that convictions, is that it's not public service at the moment to handle users' data. A public service should be kind of far away from algorithmic recommendation, from management, from user data. You can have all the content data you want. You can build all the content data system you want, but users' data, a public service shouldn't really try to go into that field. So, at the moment, there is at least in France, there is a kind of philosophy or the kind of even let's say. They're almost afraid of us trying to go deep into users' data and say, we can prove you that we can manage users' data in other way that the attention economy platforms are doing so. So we have a long way to go. So first, you are threatened by the let's say the budget policy, and we're not at a moment where states want to develop their public media company, with an exception of Germany. Germany has improved, has increased the financement of the public media companies because of the challenges of today. But in France and other countries, they are really saying, well, you know, do we need really public services media company as we did 30 or 40 years ago? We're not sure. And the second thing is that they say, they have this conviction, and maybe I'll take 10 seconds to say that it's done. So I've heard very high-level people in this country say, Bruno, what are you talking about? Everything is done. C'est fini. C'est décidé. It's done. You know, the competition is closed. Facebook has won. Twitter has won. So American platforms has won. And we are not able to build an alternative or something else, because they see that as the only pattern. A social network is only a social network with 3 billion users. Otherwise, it's not social network. And said, there are a lot of social networks patterns possible. You, Ethan, have developed a lot of ideas about it. And said, no. If you are not able to build, let's say, the European Facebook, you don't build anything. And it's the same thing as far as video platforms are concerned. If you're not able to build YouTube, you shouldn't try to do something. If you're not able to make a Netflix, it's not possible. And so there is these strange things in Europe. Either you build big, and you won't be able because those companies already exist, or you don't do anything.
So let's... there's a tendency in American academe to ask questions which are basically encouraging the interviewer to give a speech. So I'm going to try to avoid doing that. But you've identified that European regulators are nervous about experimenting with user data. Build what you want, stay out of the data game. There's an alternative, which is you could build tools that empower the user. As you've mentioned, I'm trying to build tools that give users control over their social networks. You could imagine for Arte a tool that allowed a user to navigate the streaming content space. So in the way that I would like to build something that gives a user more control over Facebook, over Twitter, over small social networks, you could build a player that supports Arte content, but also supports Netflix and YouTube and HBO instead of all of the others here. Is there an appetite from the European regulatory point of view to empower the user to escape these algorithms that you are justifiably worried about? Can you imagine Europe taking that seat at the table and say, to remove users from the power that Netflix has over collecting data and such, we are going to build tools loyal to the user? Is that a possibility?
Let's say that you have to consider two stages. Mm-hmm. The first stage would be a kind of regulatory stage with interoperability of a lot of the system, and the second stage would be financing and building. From the first stage, I'm very optimistic. Mm-hmm. There is Thierry Breton and at the European Commissions are really focused on that. Let's say let's try to have the walls tumbling down, allowing interoperability into different social networks, maybe one day into different video platforms. Otherwise, I mean, you can navigate easily with your preferences that you can manage. So I think we can be reasonably optimistic that, let's say, the legal framework or the regulatory framework in Europe allows you at a moment to have more power. I've seen these articles in the US press talking about content fortress. Mm-hmm. Let's say you have a platform, and then after the platform, you build the fortress that you
make sure no one will ever interoperate, no one will ever challenge you.
Exactly, and so the fortress will be you as a user, you will be really a prisoner of the content fortress. And I'm reasonably optimistic that the regulatory and legal framework in Europe will normally prevent content fortress from being fully operative in this continent, and that is something really nice and a very nice to have position compared to other countries. I'm not for the moment as optimistic as far as the second element is concerning, that is financing a tool. Because we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go in order, to change this conviction, which I told you about, and which relies on two things. First, the game is already done. Nobody can build anything else. Otherwise, something completely different. This is why our president is talking about a French metaverse, which I absolutely don't know what he's talking about. But okay, let's assume a French metaverse or European metaverse. You know, to say, okay, this battle was lost. Let's focus on
the French metaverse will have very, very good cafes in cyberspace
and cheese and bread. But anyway, let's talk seriously. So first conviction they have is that the battle was lost, and it's definitely lost. And the second conviction is that it's a very French conviction, is that we French are not good as in order to create things, but to regulate things. We have a long way to go in order for that to happen. I'm not sure also that the European Commission will be, or the French state or whatever, will be the good institution to think about these kind of things. And I have not seen for the moment an encouragement for public companies in order to try to create those things. The tools exist normally on the paper. You have this line of financing that we could do something else. But the French, the public service media companies are not tech companies. This is the problem. And for the moment, we have not seen that solution.
There is one thing to say for the power of regulation, which is that if French regulation influences EU regulation, and there's good progress being made with the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, it's possible that along with German, Scandinavian, so on and so forth, there could be a great deal of creativity in this space, and you could imagine the French regulatory genius creating the environment where there is something new and cooperative coming out of it, which would be marvelous. You've given us two very provocative books in a short period of time. We have The Civilization of the Goldfish. We have the revolution, the Goldfish civilization fights back. You're a media professional. Obviously, you're thinking in terms of trilogy. Is there another topic in this space that you're anxious to bring attention to?
The real question now is centralization, decentralization. In fact, it's so for the moment I don't have that in my mind. I mean, the last book was published 3 months ago, but this what I'm very keen to avoid is to replace centralization by another centralization. It's the market centralization was not very good for us. I'm not sure, when I'm speaking here as a French guy, that a state centralization would be a good, even if, let's say, a free market platform centralization was not good for the web. And the state regulatory centralization wouldn't be as good either. So I think we have to figure out with those blockchain, NFT, metaverse, whatever you want. In fact, we're seeing once again to centralization, decentralization debate taking place, and I think the user is very far away from this debate. Once again, we are not taking into account in this kind of debate today. But I'm maybe there will be a trilogy. The publishers say, laughing, it will be the aquarium trilogy. But for the moment, I have not that in mind. I'm really trying to convince people here that we should build tools. And this is why I'm always very focused on your work and the ideas you develop, Ethan, because I think everybody was so obsessed by scalability that we are feeling powerless because we don't have scale at the moment. But I think the real way to envision a decentralized internet is to accept, once again, that small can be beautiful. You mentioned I'm working with Arte. Arte is a small channel as compared to big networks in Europe, but we have been able to convince people that we were useful and we had some quality and people love us, and we have been able to develop whenever we're small. And I think the big challenge for us is to have a digital media space, a digital economic space where small actors can live. And this is the main challenge we have. If the digital is completely obsessed with scalability, then we will replace a nightmare by another nightmare.
One of the things I love most about your writing, and I love most about you as an individual, is that you're always centered on the human. And the books are very human in scale. They're very much about that personal struggle with the device, how we are all individually navigating this. Bruno Patino, president of Arte Television, professor at journalism at Sciences Po. Such a pleasure to see you.
Thank you very much, Ethan. Thank you.
Reimagining the Internet is hosted by me, Ethan Zuckerman, and produced by Mike Sugarman, who also composed this music. Follow us at publicinfrastructure.org to learn more about what we're up to at the Initiative for Digital Public Infrastructure, and please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it.